Star Wars is finally coming back to theaters, and Disney wants you to believe that this is a glorious return. The music swells, the lightsabers glow, Baby Yoda blinks those big merchandising eyes. And somewhere at Lucasfilm, an executive whispers, "Please clap." Because according to the early box office tracking, the Mandalorian and Grogu is looking at a domestic opening somewhere around $90 to $100 million. Now, for most movies, that would be fantastic. For most franchises, that would be champagne, press releases, executive bonuses, and at least 3 variety articles about how theatrical is back, baby. But for Star Wars, that's where the receipts start getting uncomfortable. Because this is not supposed to be just another movie. This is supposed to be the return of Star Wars to theaters, the comeback, the big screen revival. The moment Disney proves that years of Disney Plus content didn't turn one of the biggest theatrical brands in movie history into premium streaming homework. And right now, this doesn't look like a victory lap. This looks like brand triage. So let's talk about it. Welcome back to The Critical Nerd, where we keep our expectations low and our receipts high. If you're already subscribed, humble thank you to those of you, and welcome back, my fellow spreadsheet survivors. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel where we look past the Axis media hype, ignore the corporate confetti cannon, and ask the most dangerous question in modern Hollywood. What do the numbers actually say? And today, the numbers are coming from a galaxy far, far away. But unfortunately for Disney, they're landing a little too close to Solo territory. So before we get into it, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and ring the notification bell because apparently Star Wars needs more support systems than a Disney shareholder meeting. Now, I need to be very clear right up front. This is not a Star Wars is dead video. That's too easy. In fact, it's lazy. Star Wars is not dead. Star Wars, well, it's worse than dead. It's managed. It's a brand now being carefully walked through the mall by handlers wearing a helmet, holding Grogu plushies, and pretending everything is fine while the early tracking report quietly sweats over in the corner. Because The Mandalorian and Grogu is not just a movie, it's a test. A very expensive, very public, very awkward test. Can Disney plus Star Wars still become theatrical Star Wars? That's the first question. Can audiences be trained for years to watch Star Wars as streaming content and then suddenly be convinced to pay theater prices again? Can Lucasfilm take a show that started as one Disney Star Wars thing everybody actually agreed on and turn it into a full-blown theatrical event? That is the real story. Not just whether this movie opens big, but whether Star Wars still feels big. Let's start with the obvious. The Mandalorian and Grogu is being sold as the return of Star Wars to theaters. This is the first Star Wars movie since The Rise of Skywalker way back in 2019. Think about that for a second. Disney bought Lucasfilm, launched a new trilogy, pushed out spin-offs, built Galaxy's Edge, flooded Disney Plus with shows, and then Star Wars basically disappeared from movie theaters for years. Why? Because the theatrical brand got messy. The sequel trilogy divided the fan base. Solo underperformed. Projects were announced, delayed, reworked, rumored, canceled, revived, buried, and then rediscovered like an artifact in a Lucasfilm conference room labeled, "Maybe after the next investor call." We heard about the Rian Johnson trilogy. We heard about the Benioff and Weiss movies. Hope I pronounced that right. We heard about Rogue Squadron. We heard about Kevin Feige's Star Wars movie. We heard about Taika Waititi. We heard about Damon Lindelof. We heard about Rey coming back. We heard about the Dawn of the Jedi movie. We heard about the Filoni movie. We heard about the Mandoverse crossover event. And at some point, Star Wars movie news started sounding less like a slate and more like Lucasfilm throwing darts at a corkboard while Kathleen Kennedy stands nearby saying, "This one is definitely happening. Well, probably, maybe, don't write that down." So now, after years of chaos, Disney is finally bringing Star Wars back to theaters with a movie based on a Disney Plus show, and not just any Disney Plus show, the Disney Plus show. The one that launched the platform's Star Wars era. The one that gave Disney its most marketable post-sequel trilogy character. The one that made people briefly say, hey, maybe they still know what they're doing. And yes, I'm talking about Grogu, Baby Yoda. The tiny green force-sensitive merchandise goblin who single-handedly did more for Disney Plus than half of Phase 4 did for Marvel. But that's also the problem. Because The Mandalorian worked because it felt fresh. It felt simple. It was a space western. It was a bounty hunter protecting a mysterious child. It was not trying to fix the galaxy. It was not trying to explain Palpatine somehow. It was not asking you to read 3 comics, play 2 video games, watch an animated series, and decode a Vanity Fair article just to understand why someone is wearing a different robe. It was a guy in a helmet and a little green puppet going on adventures. And people liked it. Then Disney did what Disney does. It started expanding and explaining and connecting and cross-promoting and cameo loading. And suddenly, The Mandalorian was no longer just The Mandalorian. It was part of the Mandoverse, which was part of the Filoniverse, which was adjacent to Ahsoka, which was connected to the Book of Boba Fett, which was somehow where major Mandalorian plot points happened, even though the show was not called The Mandalorian. Because apparently, if you wanted to understand why Grogu was back with Mando, you had to watch episodes of the Book of Boba Fett, a show that was allegedly about Boba Fett. The legendary bounty hunter who spent half the show being less interesting than anyone else around him? That's the Disney Plus problem. They took a simple hit and turned it into homework. Now let's get to the number that makes this whole thing interesting. Early long-range tracking has The Mandalorian and Grogu projected somewhere around $90 to $100 million domestic opening weekend. And again, let's be fair, that's not a bad number. If a new sci-fi movie opened to $100 million, every studio in town would be drooling. If Dune opened to $100 million, Warner Brothers would build a sandworm statue in the lobby. If Star Trek opened to $100 million, Paramount would declare a national holiday and make Alex Kurtzman Emperor of Lens Flares. But this is Star Wars. Different standard, different expectations, different historical weight. This is the franchise that used to open like a cultural holiday. The Force Awakens opened to nearly $248 million domestic. The Last Jedi opened to about $220 million. Even The Rise of Skywalker, after all the baggage, all the backlash, and all the somehow Palpatine returned energy, still opened around $177 million. Now compare that to Solo. Solo opened to around $83 million for the 3-day weekend. And that movie became the flashing red warning light that maybe, just maybe, Star Wars was not automatically bulletproof anymore. So when The Mandalorian and Grogu is tracking around 90 to 100 million, that puts it much closer to Solo than the sequel trilogy. And that there's the receipt. Not that the movie is doomed, not that nobody cares, not that Grogu is finished, but that theatrical Star Wars may no longer be operating like theatrical Star Wars. Disney wants this to feel like Star Wars is back. But the tracking says Star Wars is cautiously re-entering the room and asking if anyone is still mad. And that is where the Access Media spin is going to get very funny. Because if the movie opens to 100 million, the headlines will probably be Star Wars triumphantly returns to theaters. Grogu powers Disney to box office victory. Lucasfilm proves the doubters wrong. But let's be honest. If your big Star Wars theatrical comeback opens closer to Solo than Rise of Skywalker, that's not just a comeback story. That's a brand status report. And the report says, stable, but please monitor. Disney doesn't want you comparing this to the sequel trilogy. They want you comparing it to other post-pandemic franchise movies. They want you comparing it to TV to movie transitions. They want you comparing it to anything except the historical standard of Star Wars itself. Because if we use the old Star Wars standard, 100 million is not the ceiling, it's the warning label. And this is the real issue. Disney spent years training audiences that Star Wars is not an event. It's content. It's something you open on an app. It's something you watch while folding laundry. It's something that drops in episodes, gets recapped by YouTubers, gets argued about online, and then disappears until the next streaming show needs to introduce another animated character into live action so Reddit can clap like seals. And now Disney wants to reverse that behavior. They want people to say, no, this one's special. This one's theatrical. Why? Because it has IMAX? Because Pedro Pascal is doing press? Because Grogu is on a cup? Because Burger King found the Force? Come on. You can't spend years turning Star Wars into streaming homework and then act shocked when the audience treats the movie like a Disney Plus season finale with better sound. It's not the audience's fault. That's brand conditioning. Disney conditioned people to wait. Wait for Disney Plus. Wait for the next episode. Wait for the recap. Wait for the timeline explanation. Wait for the Dave Filoni lore diagram. Wait for the Screen Rant article titled, Every Clone Wars reference you missed in the Mandalorian and Grogu trailer. And now they want urgency? Now they want opening weekend money? Now they want theatrical event energy? You can't microwave a brand for 6 years and then ask why it doesn't taste like a 5-star meal. This is the same problem Marvel ran into. For years, Disney trained audiences that everything was connected, everything mattered, everything was homework. Then the homework got bad. Then people stopped doing the homework. Then suddenly Avengers Doomsday shows up and Disney is basically saying, please remember Endgame. Please forget most of what happened after Endgame. Please look at Robert Downey Jr. Please be excited. Please ignore the Disney Plus tab. Star Wars is doing a version of the same thing. Except instead of RDJ's Dr. Doom helmet, they have Grogu's big, adorable eyes. And let's be honest, Grogu is powerful. Grogu sells toys. Grogu moves plushies. Grogu can melt the heart of a grown man who swears he's done with Disney Star Wars. But can Grogu turn streaming fatigue into theatrical urgency? That is the billion-dollar question, or depending on this tracking, the $90 to $100 million question. Now let's talk about the marketing, because Disney is not just promoting a movie, Disney is trying to repair a brand. You can feel it. The language is all about the theatrical experience. Only in theaters, IMAX, big screen, the return of Star Wars, the event, the adventure, the magic, the child, the helmet, the nostalgia. The whole machine is firing. And it's not surprising. Disney knows this movie has to do more than make money. It has to send a message. It has to tell Wall Street, fans, theater chains, and the entertainment press, see, Star Wars still belongs in theaters. Because if this movie underperforms, the takeaway is brutal. It means Disney Star Wars, or I should say Disney Plus Star Wars, cannot automatically convert into theatrical Star Wars. It means the audience may like Grogu, but not enough to treat Disney Plus extension like a must-see movie event. It means Lucasfilm's theatrical comeback is not starting from strength. It's starting from damage control. And that is where the Access Media spin becomes predictable. Every positive tracking update will become proof that Star Wars is saved. Every trailer reaction will be treated like a cultural moment. Every influencer screening will be described as electric. Every Grogu clip will be adorable. Every fan service cameo will be a love letter. And every person asking, wait, why is the Star Wars comeback tracking near Solo? Will be called toxic, negative, or someone who just doesn't understand the modern marketplace. No, we understand it perfectly. And that's the problem. We understand that Disney took one of the biggest theatrical brands in history and trained audiences to experience it through a subscription app. We understand that years of uneven shows, messy continuity, canceled movie projects, and fan trust issues have consequences. We understand that nostalgia is not a business model. It's a coupon. And eventually, the coupon expires. Now, to be fair, Disney still has powerful tools here. They have Grogu. They have Din Djarin. They have Jon Favreau. They have Dave Filoni's loyal fan base. They have the Star Wars logo. They have IMAX. They have a release date built for summer attention. They have merchandising support. They have fast food tie-ins, collectibles, toys, trailer drops, press tours, theme park synergy, and the ability to make grown adults argue about a puppet on the internet. That is not nothing. This movie could still overperform. It could still climb above tracking. It could still open bigger than expected. But even if it does, the question remains, is this Star Wars coming back? Or is this Disney proving it can still squeeze one more theatrical event out of the last universally marketable thing Lucasfilm created? Because that's different. Very different. And now we have to talk about Solo because Disney would probably prefer that nobody bring it up. Unfortunately for them, I brought some receipts. Solo, a Star Wars story, was the moment the industry realized Star Wars was not invincible. Before Solo, there was this assumption that anything with the Star Wars logo would just print money. A Star Wars movie about Han Solo? Easy hit. Young Han Solo? Sure. Millennium Falcon, Chewbacca, Lando? Alden Ehrenreich, hope I pronounced that right, trying his best while the ghost of Harrison Ford judges silently from the corner? What could go wrong? Apparently a lot. The movie opened under expectations, had a troubled production, and became the first major theatrical Star Wars warning sign of the Disney era. And after that, the movie pipeline got weird. Very weird. Suddenly, spin-offs slowed down. The confidence vanished, and theatrical Star Wars entered development purgatory. So when The Mandalorian and Grogu is projected above Solo, yes, Disney can say, look, better than Solo. And technically that's true. Congratulations. You cleared the franchise's warning flare. But that's not the same as restoring the brand. That's like saying your restaurant is doing great because the health inspector only frowned twice. The more honest comparison is this. A healthy theatrical Star Wars brand used to open between 170 and 240 million domestic. A damaged theatrical Star Wars brand opened above 83 million with Solo. Now the big comeback is projected around 90 to 100 million. So the question becomes, is this movie rebuilding Star Wars? Or simply proving that the floor has moved? Because if the new Star Wars standard is, as long as it beats Solo, we're good, that's not a comeback. That is expectations management wearing a Grogu backpack. Now here's where I have to be honest because I know how this goes. If the movie opens to 100 million, some people will say, see, you were wrong, it's a hit. If it opens under 100 million, other people will say, see, Star Wars is dead. Both takes are too simple. The real analysis is more nuanced. The success for The Mandalorian and Grogu is not just opening weekend, it's legs. It's audience reception. It's repeat viewing. It's whether families show up. It's whether casual audiences feel like they can watch this without 3 seasons of homework. It's whether Star Wars can still own premium formats. It's whether the movie expands beyond the Disney Plus fan base. And most importantly, it's whether this movie makes the next theatrical Star Wars project feel bigger or smaller. Because that's the real test. If The Mandalorian and Grogu opens okay but fades quickly, that tells Disney the brand has a ceiling. If it opens strong and holds well, that gives Lucasfilm permission to pretend the last 6 years were all part of the plan. And if it underperforms, then the conversation gets very ugly very fast. Because then Disney has to explain how the safest possible theatrical Star Wars project, starring the most marketable Star Wars character they have ever created in the Disney era, couldn't fully revive the brand. And that's the nightmare scenario. Because this is not some experimental project. This is not some obscure High Republic movie. This is not some random side character. This is not a risky new concept. This is Mando and Grogu. This is Disney's safest bet. This is the layup. And if the layup hits the rim, oh boy, because then the problem is not the movie. The problem is the brand. And that brings us to the bigger Disney problem. This is not happening in isolation. Marvel is trying to reset itself with Doomsday. Pixar has been fighting to rebuild theatrical habits after training families to wait for Disney Plus. Disney Animation has been, we'll just say, inconsistent. Lucasfilm has been trying to figure out what Star Wars even is after the sequel trilogy. And across the company, you see the same pattern. Take beloved brands, flood streaming, confuse the audience, damage the event status, then act shocked when theatrical urgency doesn't magically come back. Disney Plus was supposed to be the future, and in some ways it was. But it also taught audiences a very dangerous lesson. You don't have to go to opening weekend. You don't have to buy a ticket. You don't have to make it an event. You can wait. You can stream it later. You can watch the important clips online. You can let someone else explain the lore. And once an audience learns that lesson, it's very hard to unteach. That is why the Mandalorian and Grogu matters. Not because Grogu is cute, not because Mando has shiny armor, not because the trailer has pew-pew noises and John Williams adjacent emotional manipulation. It matters because this movie is Disney testing whether Star Wars can still escape the gravitational pull of its own streaming strategy. Can Star Wars still be an event? Or is it now content with a theatrical release window? That's the whole game. And the early tracking doesn't scream disaster, but it does whisper something Disney probably doesn't want to hear. The old Star Wars is gone. The new Star Wars has to prove itself. And it has to prove itself with the audience Disney spent years frustrating, dividing, confusing, and training to stay home. Good luck. May the receipts be with you. So where does that leave us? The Mandalorian and Grogu is not automatically doomed. A $90 to $100 million opening would still be a strong number in the modern marketplace. But for Star Wars, for the first theatrical Star Wars movie in years, for the big comeback, for the movie Disney needs to prove that Disney Plus Star Wars can become theatrical Star Wars, that number raises some very uncomfortable questions. Because Disney is not just selling a movie, it's selling the idea that Star Wars is still a big screen event. And that's a much harder sell than the one adorable puppet in a shiny helmet. The real issue is not whether people like Grogu, because people like Grogu. The issue is whether people like Grogu enough to treat this Star Wars like Star Wars used to be treated. A must-see event, as a cultural moment, as something you show up for. Because Disney spent years turning Star Wars into content. Now it wants audiences to treat it like cinema again. And the early receipts say, maybe. But not without a lot of corporate sweating. So now I want to hear from you guys out there. Do you think The Mandalorian and Grogu clears 100 million opening weekend? Does it overperform? Does it underperform? Or is Disney about to find out that Star Wars fans love Baby Yoda? But not enough to pretend the last 6 years didn't happen. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and while you're down there, if you do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next box office autopsy, franchise therapy session, or corporate panic attack disguised as a press release. And until next time, keep your expectations low and your receipts high. I'm the Critical Nerd, and I'm out.